It was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing. The chamber was packed, cameras were rolling, and the air was charged with anticipation. Congressman Adam Schiff sat upright, his notes meticulously arranged in front of him. Across from him sat someone he had sparred with before, but never like this. Former judge and TV host Jeanine Pirro had been called to testify on a controversial surveillance bill Schiff had co-authored. The exchange began calmly. Pirro answered procedural questions, cited precedent, and questioned the bill's constitutionality with clinical precision. Schiff kept his tone cool, but his eyes flickered with impatience. Then Pirro said something that pushed the first domino. "Congressman Schiff, I'm not sure what's more dangerous, your bill, or the fact that you seem willing to bypass due process to get it passed." A few audible gasps rippled across the chamber. Schiff's jaw clenched. He leaned forward into the mic and said through a tight voice, "Judge Pirro, I won't sit here and be lectured by someone who peddled conspiracy theories on national television." Pirro didn't flinch. "And yet here I am, brought in to clean up the mess your legislation created." The room froze. And then Schiff snapped. He stood up, finger pointed, face flushed red. "You are out of line." Pirro slowly set her papers down. "Then let's have it on the record," she said. "Because in about 10 seconds, I'm going to lay out exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes, and your name is all over it." The room erupted in murmurs. Schiff's outburst was still echoing when Pirro calmly reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick, tabbed folder. She slid it onto the table and tapped it once. "Exhibit A," she said coolly. "Internal memos between your office and a now-defunct surveillance contractor. Dated before the bill was ever introduced." Schiff stiffened. "That's classified material, you can't," Pirro cut him off. "It's been declassified as of this morning, Congressman." "I made sure of that." Gasps again. A few aides in the gallery exchanged wide-eyed glances. Cameras zoomed in. Judge Pirro opened the folder and read aloud, "We'll get the authorizations through fast. Schiff's people are on board. No need for the courts if we route it through national security loopholes." She looked up. "That's your team discussing how to bypass the judiciary." Before the legislation was even debated. The color drained from Schiff's face. "That's taken out of context." Pirro smiled like a shark. "Then by all means, explain the context, Congressman." Silence. A single cough echoed through the hearing room. Schiff's aides whispered frantically behind him, one of them pulling out their phone. Pirro flipped another page. "And here's your signature, authorizing a private security firm to monitor civilian communications, well before the bill even reached the committee floor." Schiff's voice was hoarse now. I did what I thought was necessary for national security." "Or for plausible deniability," Pirro replied, staring him down. "But unfortunately for you, Congressman, the paper trail says otherwise." A low rumble of murmurs rolled across the chamber like thunder. Everything had just started to fall apart. The chairman pounded his gavel for order, but the room had already slipped into controlled chaos. Reporters whispered into microphones. Aides furiously typed on tablets. Members of the committee leaned in, some smirking, others visibly tense. Schiff stayed standing, one hand gripping the back of his chair, knuckles white. "I demand a recess," he barked, his voice trembling with restrained fury. Judge Pirro didn't even blink. "Of course you do," she said smoothly. "Because what comes next won't be as easy to spin." The chairman hesitated. "The witness will proceed. Congressman Schiff, you'll have your chance." Schiff slowly sank into his seat, his glare fixed on Pirro like he was trying to set her on fire with his eyes. Pirro continued, now flipping to a new tab in her binder. "Exhibit B, testimony from a former analyst at Securitech Global, the surveillance contractor your office secretly retained. He states under oath that he was instructed to scrub names from metadata reports, particularly names tied to elected officials and media contacts. The room fell completely silent. Schiff's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Pirro leaned in. "Would you like me to read his sworn affidavit, or would you prefer we play the video deposition?" Schiff turned to his legal advisor behind him. The man shook his head, whispered something, then slipped him a note. Pirro caught the motion and smiled faintly. "It's funny," she said. "For someone who's made a career out of demanding transparency, you sure move fast when the spotlight turns." Schiff slammed his hand on the table. "This is a political hit job." Pirro calmly replied, "No, Congressman. This is accountability." The gallery burst into quiet applause before being hushed by security. The damage was done. And the foundation beneath Schiff's feet was starting to crumble. Before Schiff could regroup, another member of the committee, a junior Republican from Texas, cleared his throat and held up a USB drive. "I request permission to enter new evidence into the record," he said, eyes flicking toward Schiff. "Something that just hit my inbox this morning. I believe the witness will want to hear it." The chairman gave a cautious nod. "Proceed." An aide inserted the drive into the room's media terminal. A screen lit up behind the panel. The file loaded, Schiff_conference call_audio.mp3. Schiff's head snapped toward the screen. "Wait. That's not authenticated." Too late. A voice, his voice, filled the chamber. "We can't afford blowback. If this gets out, we redirect blame. Leak it to the committee, make it look bipartisan. Pirro's name never comes up." There was no mistaking it. It was raw, unedited, and damning. Everyone turned to look at him. Schiff's jaw twitched. His tie suddenly looked too tight. Pirro turned slightly in her chair, arms crossed. "Redirect blame, Congressman. Why would my name ever come up, unless you knew something was illegal from the start?" Schiff's face flushed deep red. "That audio is doctored. This is a smear." But the tech assistant in the room stood up, nervously holding a document. "Sir, we verified the metadata. Timestamp matches, so does the IP." The committee chair leaned forward. "Congressman Schiff, did you, or did you not, authorize the manipulation of committee findings to protect your involvement with Securitech?" Schiff didn't answer. Pirro spoke instead. "If you won't respond, I will. And if this committee fails to act, the next stop is federal court." Gasps rippled again. Even some of Schiff's allies now looked away, their expressions blank. The moment was no longer about party lines. It was about survival. And Adam Schiff's grip on his political future was slipping fast. Schiff leaned forward, elbows on the desk, breathing hard. His voice came out low, almost a whisper. "I didn't sign off on anything illegal. I was misled." Pirro arched an eyebrow. "By your own staff? By your own signature?" She slid another document across the table, a clearance form bearing Schiff's name, authorizing pre-implementation of the surveillance program with off-the-record contingencies. "Deniability doesn't look good in ink, Congressman." Schiff didn't respond. The chairman sighed, rubbing his temples. "This committee will now move into closed session to review this evidence. Until then, Congressman Schiff, you are instructed to remain available for questioning. No exceptions." Suddenly, a voice called out from the chamber entrance. "Chairman, pardon the interruption, but you'll want to see this." A Capitol security officer stepped forward with a sealed folder. He handed it directly to the chairman, who opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the contents, then froze. He looked up, pale. "This just came from the Inspector General's office, an emergency referral for possible criminal investigation." Schiff shot up. "That's ridiculous. I still have clearance." You had clearance," Pirro cut in. "But the moment you weaponized it for personal control, you crossed the line." The chairman handed the folder to the ranking member. "This goes beyond ethics. This is federal. And it's no longer in our hands. As if on cue, two plainclothes federal agents entered quietly from the back. Schiff's eyes darted between them. "You're not serious." The taller agent nodded. "Congressman Adam Schiff. We need to speak with you immediately." No, not here," Schiff stammered, shaking his head. "Not like this." But it was too late. The cameras had caught every second. As the agents moved in and the room descended into stunned silence, Judge Jeanine Pirro gathered her files and stood. Without another word, she walked out, heels echoing like a gavel's final strike. Outside the chamber, the media frenzy had already erupted. Reporters swarmed the hallway, shouting questions as federal agents escorted a dazed and visibly shaken Adam Schiff through the crowd. His tie was loose now, his posture slouched, not the sharp, confident figure who'd once dominated the House Intelligence Committee. Flashes burst from cameras. Headlines were already forming. Schiff under fire, federal probe confirmed, Judge Pirro's testimony triggers legal storm, surveillance scandal rocks Capitol Hill. Back inside the hearing room, Pirro stood in a side hallway, arms crossed, as a journalist cautiously approached. "Judge Pirro," the reporter asked, "did you anticipate this outcome?" Pirro glanced toward the chamber, then back to the camera with that unmistakable steel in her eyes. "I came here to tell the truth," she said flatly. "What happened after that, is what happens when truth meets power unchecked." Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the committee reviewed the mountain of evidence. Pirro's binder. The leaked call. The contract authorizations. The affidavit from the former analyst. The chairman sat silently for a moment, then spoke. "This will trigger a full congressional investigation. We have no choice." One senior staffer asked quietly, "And if it leads to others?" The chairman gave a hard look. "Then we follow it wherever it goes." By the end of the day, Adam Schiff's office released a brief statement. "Congressman Schiff maintains his innocence and looks forward to clearing his name." But by then, the story had already shifted. This wasn't just about Schiff anymore. It was about a system cracking open, and the one woman who struck the first blow with facts, not fury. Within 24 hours, the political landscape began to shift. One by one, Schiff's closest allies in Congress began issuing vague, non-committal statements, no longer standing behind him, but not condemning him either. "We await the outcome of the investigation. These are serious allegations that must be addressed. The congressman will have his day to respond." It was Washington Code 4, "You're on your own." Behind the scenes, panic had set in. Staffers were shredding papers, purging emails, and lawyering up. Whispers of subpoenas began circulating like wildfire. Lobbyists pulled support. Donors backed away. The party machine that once championed Schiff now fell eerily silent. Meanwhile, Pirro's calm dismantling of the narrative had gone viral. Clips of her confrontation were playing non-stop on every network. Social media lit up with hashtags, #Pirro exposed it, #Schiff collapse, #SurveillanceGate. Commentators across the spectrum, from progressives to hardline conservatives, couldn't deny what they saw. Even longtime critics of Pirro were grudgingly calling her measured, lethal, and disturbingly precise. While Schiff holed up with legal counsel, Pirro returned to her studio for a surprise appearance on her own show. She opened with just one sentence: "When politicians forget the law, it's up to the people to remind them." She didn't need to say more. Back in D.C., federal investigators confirmed they were expanding the inquiry, now probing procurement fraud, civil liberties violations, and obstruction of justice. Names of other legislators were rumored to be involved. And in the shadows, Schiff made a desperate call to an old political fixer. "I need help," he whispered. But the response was ice cold: "You needed help a week ago. Now you need a miracle." The following morning, Washington woke up to another bombshell. The New York Times dropped an exclusive leak: Whistleblower identifies coordinated suppression network, linked directly to Schiff's office. The report included encrypted communications, contractor memos, and, most damning of all, a suppressed internal audit that warned of legal overreach 9 months before the legislation was pushed. The audit had been signed by a senior compliance officer, and quietly buried. Worse still, the whistleblower had gone on record. A former cybersecurity advisor with top-level clearance. He revealed that his warnings were dismissed, and that he was advised to take paid leave just weeks before the first contract with Securitech was executed. Within hours, Judge Pirro was trending again, only this time, not because of her takedown in Congress. She had just been invited to testify before a federal grand jury. By noon, she arrived at the courthouse in a sharp navy suit, surrounded by federal escorts. Cameras swarmed her, but she kept walking, face unreadable. Meanwhile, Schiff's legal team scrambled. A motion was filed to seal certain records, an obvious attempt to control what came next. But the judge denied it. Transparency had become the new currency, and Schiff was bankrupt. That afternoon, one of his former aides flipped. She reached out to federal prosecutors with a deal. In exchange for limited immunity, she handed over digital backups, including encrypted chat logs that laid out how dissenters inside Schiff's office were pressured to stay silent, or disappear from payroll. The final firewall had collapsed. Schiff's attorney, red-faced and sweating, addressed the press outside the Capitol. "My client denies all wrongdoing and believes this is a politically motivated attack." But no one was buying it anymore. And then came the knock at his door. Late that evening, inside his upscale Georgetown townhouse, Adam Schiff sat in silence, tie off, jacket draped over a chair, TV muted. The room was dark except for the glow of his phone, where notifications kept lighting up the screen. Federal grand jury expands probe. Pirro scheduled for second testimony round. Schiff's chief of staff cooperates with prosecutors. He stared at the headlines without blinking. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the front door. He froze. A second later, the doorbell rang. A deliberate pause. Then another knock, slower, heavier. He stood, slowly making his way to the door, dread rising in his throat. Through the peephole, he saw 2 suited figures with federal badges. Behind them, a third man held a sealed warrant. Schiff opened the door only a crack. "Is this about the committee hearing?" The taller agent replied, "No, sir. This is about obstruction, destruction of government records, and abuse of authority under the Surveillance Oversight Act." Schiff's breath hitched. "You're arresting me?" The agent didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward and handed over the warrant. "We need access to your home office and personal devices. Now." Schiff looked down at the paper, then slowly opened the door. As the agents entered, one turned toward him and added quietly, "You might want to call your attorney." The scene inside turned tense. Laptops were bagged, documents photographed, drawers opened. Schiff stood motionless as they moved through his private office, where sealed folders labeled "Confidential" sat atop a desk still cluttered from the week before. He knew what was happening now couldn't be spun or silenced. It was real. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb. Inside, Adam Schiff realized, this wasn't just a political scandal anymore. It was a reckoning. Days later, the Capitol was eerily calm. No shouting reporters, no frantic staffers. Just the heavy silence that settles over Washington when something irreversible has happened. Adam Schiff was formally indicted on 4 federal charges: obstruction of justice, abuse of power, destruction of federal records, conspiracy to circumvent surveillance oversight laws. His resignation came via a 2-sentence email, sent at midnight to House leadership. No press conference. No final speech. Just a quiet exit cloaked in disgrace. Meanwhile, Judge Jeanine Pirro stood before a packed press room after her final testimony to the grand jury. Cameras flashed as she stepped to the podium. Reporters hung on every word. "This was never about political sides," she said clearly. "It was about the truth, and whether any of us are still willing to fight for it." The room erupted in applause. The fallout was massive. Hearings were reopened. A new task force was created to review all private surveillance contracts issued over the past 5 years. Several aides resigned. One senator was quietly placed under investigation. And in the court of public opinion, Schiff's name became shorthand for betrayal of public trust. Late one evening, Pirro returned home to find a handwritten letter slipped under her door. No name, no return address. Just a single sentence: "You reminded Washington who it really works for." She folded it, smiled faintly, and placed it in her desk drawer. The camera panned out as she sat back in her chair, case closed, legacy sealed. And somewhere across town, behind the concrete walls of a federal holding facility, a disgraced congressman stared at a blank ceiling, wondering how it all slipped away in seconds.